ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ וביום השביעי שבת וינפש ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם ושמרו בני ישראל את
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו.
Say Adonai Eloheinu Be'amcha Yisrael U'tefilatam Be'ahava tikabel. Humbled in prayer we seek to reach you, hoping to be heard, hearts open wide, longing to be true. Oh, let us know that you are near. Open our hearts that we may hear your still clear voice within us all. May we be worthy in our prayer and feel your presence everywhere. And may we answer when you call. Say Adonai Eloheinu Be'amcha Yisrael U'tefilatam Be'ahava tikabel. Oh, let us know that you are near. Open our hearts that we may hear your still clear voice within us all. May we be worthy in our prayer and feel your presence everywhere. And may we answer when you call. And may you answer when we call. Say Adonai Eloheinu. Say Adonai Eloheinu. Tov, Tov, Tov lehodot, Tov lehodot l'Adonai. Tov, Tov, Tov lehodot, Tov lehodot l'Adonai. Uzamer l'shimcha elyon, l'shimcha elyon. Uzamer, Uzamer l'shimcha elyon. Tov, Tov, Tov lehodot, Tov lehodot l'Adonai. Tov, Tov, Tov lehodot, Tov להודות לאדוני, להגיד בבוקר חסדך ואמונתך בלילות, בלילות. טוב, טוב, טוב להודות, טוב להודות לאדוני, טוב, טוב, טוב להודות, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך העליון, לשמך העליון, ולזמר, ולזמר לשמך העליון. טוב, טוב, טוב להודות, טוב להודות לאדוני, טוב, טוב, טוב להודות, טוב להודות לאדוני.
Sing unto God, all the earth, a new song. I will sing unto God. Sing unto God, and we'll all sing along.
All the earth, a new song unto God.
Shiru l'Adonai, kol haaretz. Shiru l'Adonai, sing unto God, all the earth, a new song. I will sing unto God. Sing unto God, and we'll all sing along.
All the earth, a new song unto God. Shiru l'Adonai, Shiru l'Adonai,
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Welcome. In Maimonides' listing of the 613 commandments, the first of those 613 is believing in God. The last is a king not amassing great personal wealth. In a certain way, those two commandments, one positive and one negative, are intimately related to one another. Believing in God entails believing that we have limits. Much of Judaism reinforces this idea. When reciting the Amidah, the Tefillah, the standing prayer, according to Jewish law, the regular worshiper bows at the beginning and at the end of the first and the last blessing. A high priest bows at the beginning and the end of each blessing. But a king must bow throughout the entire prayer. Because ego is integral to our characters, and its distortions are common to our struggles. It pushes us to do things and even want things that higher impulses warn against. as the world recognizes the eminence of an individual, a priest, a prophet, a sage, a king, or in our day, a politician, or a tycoon, or a star, or even an athlete, the temptation to self-aggrandizement grows greater. Acknowledging that we are human and ephemeral, that there is a God infinitely greater than ourselves, helps induce the humility that reminds us not to overestimate our own gifts and accomplishments. The first and the last mitzvah tie together to remind us achievement is worthy, but arrogance is outrageous. And so with that in mind, we enter the Shabbat by lighting our Shabbat candles. And as is our style here at Micah, we continue welcoming Shabbat by taking the beat up just a bit and the words of Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharet, Malachei Elyon, Mimelech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharet, Malachei Elyon, Mimelech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharet, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Mimelech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem Shalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Mimelech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharet, Malachei Shalom השלום, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלאכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. שלום עליכם, מלאכי השרת, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלאכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. שיכם לשלום, מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלאכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. שיכם לשלום, מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלאכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Continue with the words of Baruch Hu. Nope. Actually, before we do that, we're going to hear from Dylan Landa, whose bar mitzvah will be tomorrow morning at 10:30. He leads us now in the words of Hatzi Kaddish. 1, 2, 3.
Yikadal v'yikadash v'mei rabba, amen. Ba'alma divrach hirute, yamlich malchute, b'chayachon u'vyomechon, uv'chayda kol be'Yisrael, ba'gala u'bizman, ka'ariv, v'imru, amen. Yehei shmei rab mevorach, le'ol le'olam le'ol maya, yizbarak, Yitbrak v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar, v'yitramam, v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitalal, shemei dekudesha brichu, le'elam mikol birchata, v'shirata, tushbechata, v'nechemata, dami ran belma, v'imru, amen.
Baruch hu et Adonai ha-mevorach. Baruch Adonai ha-mevorach, ha-mevorach le'olam va'ed,
Continue with the prayer of Ma'ariv Aravim.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'dvaro ma'ariv aravim. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher
The Shema is the perfect prayer on which to close your eyes and really direct your attention inward. We're reminded, the first word of the prayer, Shema, to listen. And we listen a little bit better when one of our other senses is dampened. So by closing your eyes, you're hopefully listening a little bit more astutely and listening to the words of oneness, the call to remember that we are interconnected, all of us together, striving for a good life, striving for joy, striving for health, each one helping one another to achieve that. We invite you to share those words with us at this time.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
We continue chanting the words of Ve'ahavta.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
The Roman historian Tacitus relays that when Pompey and his troops entered the Holy of Holies in the temple in Jerusalem in about 63 BCE, they found it, and the word is untenanted. It was a mystery to them to find nothing inside the sacred shrine of the Jews. They assumed there'd be statues, but as the Jewish historian Josephus wrote, in the sanctuary stood nothing whatever. Judaism declared even to an uncomprehending world that the greatest reality was intangible. Nothing produced by human hands could begin to adequately represent the creator of the universe. God was literally no thing, and any object was a betrayal of that reality. Now, we may be amused at Pompey's surprise, but things have not changed all that much. We too are enchanted by the tangible and give most of our lives to contemplating that which we can measure or acquire. Yet again and again, Judaism wrenches us out of the mire of material and back into the space that the Roman soldier saw. You cannot touch transcendence. The God of Israel remains beyond depiction and beyond comprehension. How astonishing that one small tribe of people was able to recognize that truth thousands of years ago and stubbornly hold onto it in a hostile and unenlightened world until it became part of the legacy of humanity.
Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 ya la la la. Mi chamocha ba'el Madonna, mi chamocha netar v'kodesh, nora tehilot osefele, nora tehilot osefele.
And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long.
Mi chamocha ba'el Madonna, mi chamocha netar v'kodesh, nora tehilot osefele, nora tehilot osefele.
And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long.
Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la.
Ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 la. Well, our days here are getting longer, and I think for many of us, myself included, that's a welcome change. But night still comes, and as Jews, each day we pray the words of Hashkivenu, that we may know safety and peace, that God may grant us a Sukkot Shlomecha, a shelter of peace, as we cross over into the new day.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom V'hamidenu Shomreinu L'chaim.
Hashkivenu
In the darkness
Adonai
of the night,
Eloheinu
when I'm scared
L'shalom
to close my eyes,
V'hamidenu
won't you ease my
Shomreinu
troubled mind?
L'chaim.
Hashkivenu
Hashkivenu
may you guide us
Adonai
on our way,
Eloheinu
walk beside us and keep us safe.
V'hamidenu
Hear these humble
Shomreinu
words we pray.
L'chaim.
Hashkivenu Ufros aleinu Sukkot Shlomecha.
In the shadow of your wings,
Ufros aleinu Sukkot Shlomecha.
in the promise morning brings. Hashkivenu
So much heartache,
Adonai,
so much hurt,
Eloheinu
so many hungers, so many search
V'hamidenu
for your shelter.
Shomreinu
and peace on earth.
L'chaim
Hashkivenu
Hashkivenu
Adonai.
Adonai
Hashkivenu
Hashkivenu
Adonai.
Adonai
Hashkivenu
Hashkivenu
Adonai. Lishalom.
We welcome back our very own Shabbat Shaband.
One, two, three, four.
If you'd like, please rise and join us for the words of the Amidah.
Adonai tzivatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, v'Konei Hakol, v'Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, u'mevii gula livnei v'nehem, l'ma'an shemo be'ahava, melech ozer u'moshia u'magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Bezrat Sarah. Atah gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechayei hakol atarav le'oshia. Mechalkel chayim bechesed, Mechayei hakol berachamim rabim. Somech noflim verofech cholim, Umatir asurim, Umekayem emunato, Lishenei afar, Michamocha bal givurot, Umido melach,
מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה הכל אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
Please take these next few moments for your own silent prayers. This week, we had the opportunity to celebrate Israel's birthday, Yom Ha'atzmaut, and I've been able to travel over to the land of Israel at least 10 times, every time more incredible and special than the one before. And I hope to be able to travel there with many of you in the coming years. The first time I went to Israel, I was in 5th grade with my family. We were on a synagogue trip, like the ones we take here at Congregation Micah. And I fell in love with this song, Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, Jerusalem of Gold.
Avir harim tzalul kayayin v'reach orani nisa b'ruach ha'arbaim im kol Uvtar de matilan ve'ever shvuya b'chaloma ha'ir asher badad yoshevet uv'liba choma Yerushalayim shel zahav v'shel nechoshet Shalom, hallelujah, shirayich ani kinor, Yerushalayim shel zahav, v'shel nechoshet v'shel or, hallelujah, upon the hills of time to hear the voices of the city as bells of evening chime. How many songs, how many stories the stony hills recall. Around her heart my city carries a lonely ancient wall. Yerushalayim shel zahav v'shel nechoshet v'shel or hallelujah shirayich ani kinor Yerushalayim shel zahav v'shel nechoshet v'shel or hallelujah shirayich ani kinor
We think of those in our community in need of healing on the Shabbat. We mention the names of Steve Geringer, Savannah Morris, Jane Sherberg, Paul Richter, Crystal Miller, Janice Grossman, Charlie Baugh, Monette Chance, Mickey Collins, Judith Mandel, and Karen Eisner. If I've not mentioned a name that you would like to include in our prayer of healing, I invite you, wherever you are, to mention that name at this time.
Those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say
Last week, a scholar of our movement and a tenured professor at the seminary that both Rabbi Flip and I attended passed away. And upon his passing, women came forward, former students and colleagues, asserting that this gentleman, this professor, had traumatized them, that he had abused his position of power to intimidate, gatekeep, and sexually harass them. These allegations have opened the lid on a bubbling cauldron in our reform movement of decades of sexual harassment, intimidation, and abuses of power gone unchecked. What one of my female colleagues referred to this week as a shell game of moving, violating rabbis from congregations to the seminary, to the URJ, to the CCAR, and around again, rather than addressing their abuses head on. A system of protection of congregations and institutions that has gone really unchecked. Demonstrating what I think is superb leadership, the current president of our seminary, Dr. Andrew Rayfeld, is engaged in a listening campaign of many of my female colleagues who have stories to tell in an effort to make significant changes, hopefully in partnership with the other arms of the reform movement, namely the CCAR and the URJ. I offer all of this as a preamble to my message on this Shabbat because the issue of sexual harassment and gatekeeping and abuse of power is not new and must be rooted out. And some of the words I share with you tonight are ones that I offered several years ago on this very same Shabbat, Shabbat Tazria. Because they are still relevant, I offer them, some of them tonight, in honor of all the female clergy out there who fight for ongoing parity and respect. And as I offer these words, I cannot help but acknowledge how fortunate and grateful I am to serve a congregation that embraces female leadership in many ways, willingly and respectfully. So let me begin tonight with a poem by Galit Hassan Rokem entitled, "This Child Inside Me." This child inside me sorts my existence into elements: blood and urine, calcium and iron. In my sleep, I am a quarry where rare treasures are suddenly found. Blood and urine, calcium and iron. The fluid and elements that in part make up the physical constitution of a human body. This is the focus of our Torah this week, Parshat Tazria. Our rabbis differentiate between male and female with respect to bodily fluid composition. The particular section of Torah that we read at this time of year addresses issues of ritual purity. Some of those considerations include menstruation and childbirth and scaly skin diseases. This part of the Torah is indeed a bar or bat mitzvah student's worst nightmare. Dylan, we're so sorry, but you've handled it well. Every year, one or two innocent and unknowing soon-to-be 13-year-olds finds themselves forced to make modern, relevant meaning over nocturnal seminal emissions and afterbirth, while their more fortunate classmates with simchas that land in the fall are assigned Noah's Ark, the Garden of Eden. But here at Micah, we like to say that Leviticus builds character. Now, a word about ritual purity. For social historical context, the Torah reflects a notion that certain actions and physical conditions produce an invisible, airborne pollution that invades the Mishkan, the sanctuary, the dwelling place of the divine presence. And if the impurity is not disposed of, or in the case of a bleeding woman, completed and over, the accumulated pollution could cause Israel's God to abandon the sanctuary, an event thought to bring about a national disaster. Our Torah this week deals with the impurity of the woman who suffers from bleeding after childbirth. The Torah is not concerned with the fact that the woman will likely never sleep well again or go to the bathroom on her own for years to come, which most mothers recognize as a real source of suffering. The Torah is concerned with blood and urine, calcium and iron. Because the bleeding mother can pollute the sanctuary, the abode of the divine presence. The bleeding woman must not touch any consecrated thing nor enter the sanctuary during certain prescribed periods, no pun intended. Being denied access to holiness extends to all whom the Torah considers impure. The word in Hebrew is tameh. What needs to be understood is that the rabbis were very organized and methodical. Everything fit into its category. There was life and there was death. In the Torah, blood is synonymous with life. It's why we don't eat an animal with its lifeblood still in it, because otherwise it's not kosher. Vaginal blood had an even greater significance for some of the ancients who thought that it contained the seed that united with the male seed to produce a human being. But as menstrual fluid, it signified a lost opportunity to create life, thus linked with the process of death. And so it would render the woman impure, tameh, a pollutant. Not generally how women would choose to be described, ever. As one who is tameh, a pollutant, a woman was not only prevented from serving in the priesthood or coming in contact with a Torah, she could not have relations or physical touch with her husband during the time of her bleeding and for several days following. But modern Torah commentator Gunther Plaut offers us a different perspective and says that the laws around purity, known in Hebrew as nidah, existed to safeguard a woman and promote her overall good health. He writes, "The law protects women from the importunities of their husbands at a time when they are not physically and emotionally ready to be intimate." I can sign on to that idea. Now, maybe our tradition understood once upon a time that women needed space, and some men don't always understand boundaries. The Yiddish Torah commentary, Tzena Urena, goes even further to draw a parallel between the period of impurity following childbirth and the period of mourning following a death. It reads, the Torah states that a woman is in a state of impurity for 7 days after giving birth. Similarly, there is a 7-day period of mourning for the dead. All is counted by the number 7, the days of Shiva. A comparison is drawn between a woman's state following birth with that of a mourner. A mourner is not in a physically altered state during Shiva, but rather in a spiritually altered or emotionally altered state. So let's assume that this all makes sense and we can get on board with the idea that the laws of impurity are actually in a woman's best interest. Just try and go with me here for a minute. The Torah tells us that if a woman delivers a boy, she is tameh, a pollutant, for 1 week after the birth. But if she delivers a girl, she's a tameh, a pollutant, for 2 weeks. Now, given all the conversation we've had over the last half a decade around #MeToo and #TimesUp, I can't help but read this section of Torah differently. And so I asked my kids, 3 teenagers, what they thought about this. They didn't question why women were impure twice as long after giving birth to a girl. What they asked was, why should she be considered impure in the first place? Blood and urine, calcium and iron. Women are impure according to our tradition because we've been told that we are, thank you to all the rabbis and sages of old, but perhaps it's not the blood that renders us impure, but the unwanted, unsanctioned, uninvited touch that comes at a time, as Rabbi Plaut suggests, that women don't want it. Perhaps it's not the woman who is polluted, but the touch itself. We find ourselves living in a time when women are becoming more comfortable calling out male touch that they consider tameh, not okay. Unsanctioned, uninvited. And it's not just touch, it's the comments, the attitude, the assumptions, the sidelining. A large focus of our recent rabbinic conferences have been on the experience of female clergy in the rabbinate. Our male colleagues range from surprised to stunned to even jaw-dropped when they learned how different it could be, this experience of being a female rabbi. Congregants almost never refer to their male rabbi as honey or sweetie. It's much less common for a female rabbi to even be addressed as rabbi. First name feels appropriate when it sometimes does not with a male rabbi. Male rabbis are rarely complimented on their fashion, their figure, or their fluctuating weight. For female rabbis, it's practically a mainstay of the weekly oneg. And so much of this is about power. How does a female clergy member say to her male parishioner that she doesn't like the hug that feels too long or the kiss on the cheek that lingers when she essentially works at the pleasure of every member she serves? What we see happening today, I am certain, is about a shift in power. Women finally feeling comfortable enough to say that we have the power to tell others when it's not okay, when it doesn't feel right, when it renders us powerless. But I also worry about our power shift. In this pendulum swing of Me Too and Time's Up, could we be blurring the lines between affection and aggression? Are we scaring boys and men away from genuine expressions of caring? Rather than just telling boys and men, don't touch me in a way that makes me feel uncomfortable, we might need to empower ourselves and our girls to articulate a message about what makes them uncomfortable and to articulate it in that moment. And none of this will be easy. We'll need to all exist in an uncomfortable place of hypersensitivity, meaning men and boys will need to ask if a hug or a kiss on the cheek or physical touch is welcome. And women will need to respond honestly, and this is important, without fear of reprisal. We're essentially at a new beginning once again, and all beginnings are difficult. But this may be the start to ridding our sacred spaces of any pollutant, any impure touch or comment or gesture or abuse of power. I think our tradition hits the proverbial nail on the head when it suggests that impurity causes God to be absent. When power is abused and one person is made to feel dismissed, degraded, less than because of the actions of another or those who don't listen, I think God is absent. Human touch is instinctive. We know that babies and children thrive at greater rates when held and experience higher rates of aggression later on when they are not. Hugging alone raises our oxytocin levels, reducing stress, heart rates, and blood pressure, even strengthening immune systems. Touch improves clinical symptoms in people with eating disorders and burn victims. We signal compassion through touch, creating feelings of trust, generosity, and empathy. This movement to create equity and parity and honest listening for women is not intended to eliminate communication and connection, but to improve it. It's meant to differentiate between things that intimate couples do, lovers, and how friends or strangers interact. And there is a difference, in case any of us are unsure. This time asks us to grant misunderstanding to an overstepping of intimacy, not violation. It asks us not to presume ill will or ill intent into a warm gesture. It just requires me as a woman to tell you when it doesn't feel good, when it might make me feel uncomfortable or diminished, and expects that you will think more of me for my honesty. It would be a violation of how God created us, I feel, if we brand all physical touch as an assertion of power. Some don't know the difference, but many do. We are the torchbearers for ensuring that our sacred spaces and that all of our living and our work spaces and our education spaces are tameh-free. We can ensure that the divine presence dwells among us in the way we speak honestly with one another and respect each other's boundaries. So I'll conclude tonight by taking you back in the Torah to the book of Exodus, back to Mount Sinai and the Israelites waiting impatiently for Moses to descend. And you'll recall that they were so impatient that they urged Aaron to fashion for them an egel zahav, a golden calf, to worship. And Moses comes down Mount Sinai and sees the Jewish people dancing around the golden calf, and he takes the tablets and he thrusts them to the ground and they shatter into pieces. The divine gift of the tablets, etched by God, is now strewn on the ground. And the rabbis ask, whatever became of the tablets smashed by Moses? And the Talmud answers, the broken tablets were placed in the Holy Ark with the second intact set. Luchot v'shivrei luchot munachim ba'aron. The tablets were not buried, which is what we generally do with holy items we no longer use. They were placed in the most sacred place, the Aron HaKodesh, the Holy Ark, and eventually they sat next to the second set of tablets, the whole set of the Ten Commandments. Together they remained securely protected as the nation journeyed through the wilderness. And so why do the broken pieces remain precious? If they represent the Jewish people disregarding the covenant with God, would we not wish to simply forget about them? The idea of brokenness appears in a number of significant places in Judaism. We sound the shofar with the broken notes of the shevarim. The Hebrew word shever, the root, means broken. We begin Seder by breaking the whole piece of matzah. And when the bride and groom stand under the wedding canopy, a glass is shattered into pieces. These important symbolic rituals represent shattered and broken events in both our personal and communal lives. In Torah, in Judaism, in life, brokenness and wholeness coexist side by side. We find ourselves now in a moment of brokenness. We've been shifted into a place of discomfort, and it's only together with the voice and heart of the woman and the man that we will find our way through to a new understanding of what it means to relate and connect with kavod, with respect and honor, with scheme, with consent. It is through knowing our boundaries and expressing our comfort and discomfort that we can truly be wise to one another's boundaries and needs. Brokenness reminds us that we fail, but that we can be better. Brokenness serves as a mirror and reminds us that wholeness is possible. And then we can make manifest the divine presence in all our spaces, sacred and mundane. Shabbat Shalom. We continue with the words of Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, v'teit gedula liotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kegoyeh haratzor, v'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim, lifnei melech Malchei HaMlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu V'nemar V'haya Adonai L'melech al kol haaretz Bayom hahu Yeh Adonai echad U'shemo echad.
We remember those whose yortzites fall on the Shabbat: Virginia Craig, Dr. Robert Dendy, David B. Farber, Keith Feinberg, Kara Bedford Hanin, Lee Hillowitz, Francis Koresh, Leroy Koresh, Charles Katz, Walter Krautimer, Ethel Jane Lowell, June Older, Kathy Ann O'Neill, Madeline Rigby, Simon Rosenblum, Nathan Rossman, June Simone, Chen Rothman, Ralph Saul, Cynthia Sheldon, Bert Sheldon, Juliet Sulkin, Julius B. Weil, William D. Weinberg, and Ethel Schwartz Zeitlin. We continue mourning for Rich Moschel, Henry Foyer, Dr. Bob Sirkin, Aidan Becker, Robert Golden, Des Zamek, Elaine Farinacci, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Charlene Krahili, John Giffen, Faye Sirkin, Joyce Murray, Richard Bourne, Fran Schmerling, Peggy West, Christopher Miller, Molly Stein, Alfred Cohen, Joseph W. Blumenthal, Leonard Basked. Please feel free to add a name I did not mention, and we welcome you to rise for Kadisha Tome. Yikadal v'yikadash shemei Rabbah, ve'alma divrach yirutei ve'amlich malchutei, v'chayachon v'yomechon v'chayei kol beit Yisrael, v'agalau v'zman kariv imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah v'varach le'olam almei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalei v'yitalal shemei dekudashah b'richu, Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu ya'asei shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zichronam livracha, may the memories of our loved ones be every day a blessing, and together we say, Amen. Well, we'll make a short Kiddush and conclude tonight with Hatikva, our Israeli national anthem. But before we do, I'm not even going to share some announcements because I didn't bring them in. Well, Torah study at 9 o'clock tomorrow, followed by the Bar Mitzvah of Dylan Land at 10:30. We do have religious school J-Lab this Sunday morning. And I'm certain we have all sorts of programming taking place next week, but I'll direct you to the events page on our website. And let's make Kiddush.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Borei peri hagafen.
L'chaim. If you'd like to rise wherever you are, please do so.
Kol od balei
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We wish you a very peaceful Shabbat.